Good morning. It's good to see all of you out here this morning. Not as sunny as it's been, but still a great day to get together and study God's Word, learn more about what He would have us do in our life, and be with each other. If you will, turn with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. We're going to take our text there in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 5 through 11. So throughout our lesson today, I want you to keep this one word in your mind, and that word is wilderness. Okay? I don't know what you think of when you hear the word wilderness. Maybe you think of the children of Israel and the Israelites traveling through the wilderness for all those years because they just would not follow God's commands. Or maybe you think of mountain ranges, uninhabited mountain ranges, or a desert, or a vast forest that has no civilization. But keep that word in your minds today. Mauro Prosperi, if I'm saying that correctly, was an Italian police officer who gained worldwide fame after getting lost in the Sahara Desert in 1994. Any of you old folks out there remember that story, 1994? Anybody? Maybe? No? You've put that one in the back of your memory. But it gained notoriety and was on the national news because Mauro Prosperi was a keen athlete and runner. And he took part in the 1994 Marathon of the Sands in Morocco. Now, this was a 6-day-long endurance race in one of the most dry and barren environments on the planet. So, you think about marathon runners, and they're brave enough. You see their little stickers on the back of their car, 26.2 or 13.1, and then you look at mine and it says 0.0. They're brave, but to run a marathon or run a long distance race in the desert, that's a different type of brave. Well, he was prepared, and he was a world-class athlete, so he was prepared for these conditions. But something unexpected happened to him during the race. A sandstorm. And we don't have those here in America, but a big, huge wind with a lot of dust and dirt and sand. It blows together, and you can't see. It completely disorients you. You can't hardly breathe, and you completely lose where you're at. So a big sandstorm happened while he was running, and he became disoriented, and he lost where he was at. He lost his caravan, and he lost his location. And so there he was, stuck in the wilderness, all by himself. So for 2 days, he searched for civilization and searched for shelter. And he eventually stumbled upon this abandoned Muslim shrine. And doesn't sound nice, but he survived off of insects and bats, eating the bats and the insects, and he had some wet wipes. And so for hydration, he would suck the moisture off of the wet wipes. And again, little graphic here, but he would drink his own urine to survive. Well, after 2 days of not being found in this abandoned shrine, he decided that he was going to take matters into his own hands, and he was going to start walking. And so for 9 days, he walked, trying to find civilization in this desert. Again, surviving off of just wet wipes and drinking his own bodily fluids. And eventually, after 9 days, he was discovered and flown to the hospital immediately. They said his liver had almost failed, and that he was at the point of dying. And he wasn't able to eat solid food for about 6 months. He had to drink liquid or eat liquid food. But I tell you that story because have you ever been in a situation where you've been lost, or maybe you've been away from home for too long? I know I went to New York to have surgery back when I was about 14 years old, and there wasn't complications with the surgery, but there was just some things that I had to stay in the hospital for. And so I was in New York City for, I think, 3 weeks. I've never been so ready to get back to Alabama in my life. And when I pulled back into Alabama and then my house, there's just a feeling of escaping that wilderness and being home. And so today I want us to talk about how we as individuals can escape the wilderness of life. Because it's wild, right? It's a wilderness out there in our society and in America today. And so are you going to wander through the wilderness hopelessly, without any purpose or direction, and eventually be lost? Or are you going to find your direction and your purpose so you don't have to be wandering in the wilderness of life? Thought I had one more. I guess not. All right, so for those who are avid note takers, the first blank where it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, it says, "Nevertheless, with most of them God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness." The key word right there is overthrown. And I think in the reading today it said laid waste in the wilderness. But when you get to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, the very beginning talks about how Moses and the children of Israel were wandering through the desert for years, needlessly. And the reason was because they would not listen to God. They were constantly turning away from God. And so we can use this as an allegory or a metaphor, figuratively in our life, how we are wandering in the wilderness called life. And if we don't do the things that God wants us to do, we're going to be just like the children of Israel here, who wandered without any hope, without any purpose, without any direction, and eventually were laid waste. So the first thing I want us to look at is in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, starting in verse 5. We'll go ahead and read that. Here it says, "Nevertheless, with most of them God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things took place as examples for us." Okay? These are examples for us. So Paul is about to give us the what not to do if you don't want to be a wanderer in the wilderness. This is what you don't do. He says, "Do not desire evil as they did. Do not be idolaters as some of them were, as it is written. The people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. We must not indulge in sexual immorality as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in a single day. We must not put Christ to the test as some of them did and were destroyed by serpents, nor grumble as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come." So he lists, is what I could find, is 5 things. 5 things that we have to do or we must not do if we want to keep ourselves from wandering the wilderness called life. And so the first thing is, to escape the wilderness, we must not desire evil. You know, when you hear the word evil, I don't think there's one person in this audience who says, "Yep, that's me," right? None of us will identify with that because we like to think of ourselves as good. And a lot of times our self-perception is better than the actual reality, right? And so let's bring ourselves back down to reality this morning. At some point in your life, you've struggled with this. You've struggled with the desire to do evil or just desired evil. We've all been tempted in here, all right? Tempted to sin. And so we've desired to commit those sins against God. That desire is not healthy. And Paul tells us here that if we want to keep ourselves from hell and from this wilderness, that we have to not desire evil. You see, let me ask you this question. Can you desire evil and not know? Can you subconsciously desire evil and not know that you are desiring or participating in evil? Now, I believe that we can. I believe that we can subconsciously or maybe even consciously be doing things that we're not supposed to and not find them as evil. That's why God tells us in 1 Peter that we're supposed to be on guard, because the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. We have to be on guard. And so the first thing I think we need to do is remove ourselves from this pedestal that we are completely unable to sin, or we are completely unable to be evil. That's in our capacity. And if we're not careful, we will become just like the children of Israel and have this evil in us that keeps us from God. Let's go to Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1, we're going to be in verse 28. Now, as I read this passage, I mean, if this is not America today, I don't know what is. Romans chapter 1, verse 28 through 32, it says, "And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind." Do we see that in our country today? People with a debased mind, with a mind completely flipped backwards? Absolutely. God gave them up what not ought to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. That sounds just like our society today. I mean, we live in a society right now where you can get canceled if you say that a man can't get pregnant. I mean, who would have ever thought that? Now, evil has been existing from the beginning of time, right? But I don't know that there's ever been a society that said a man could get pregnant, except this one. And so a lot of times we see that our country has been given up to a debased mind. I mean, their minds have been completely flipped. What's right is now what's wrong to them. And what's wrong is now what's right to them. And we have to be careful that we don't fall into this trap, that we recognize evil for evil, and that we want to stay away from it. Philippians 4 verse 8 says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellent, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things." Let's not get caught up in thinking about evil and thinking about sin. Let's dwell on the good things. You know, with all this COVID stuff going on, our principal at my school developed our new slogan for this year, and it's "Positivity Matters." And I think that can be applied to church as well. Positivity matters, not just positivity and going along with everything and every type of evil, but let's think on the good things, the things that are righteous, the things that are holy, the things that are commendable. And if we do these things, we will keep ourselves from being sucked in to the darkness. And we will shine as lights, as God's servant. And so don't be drawn to evil. Don't desire that. Be careful. Focus on the good things. And if you do that, you're not going to wander in this wilderness. You're going to find your place. You're going to find your home with God. Number 2, if you want to escape the wilderness, we must not be idolaters. So if you look in verse 7 of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, it tells us here that if we want to keep from being like the children of Israel who wandered in the wilderness for so long, that we have to keep ourselves from being idolaters. Now, I don't think anybody in here, and I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody in here at night has this Buddha figurine that they get down on the knees and pray to. All right? I don't think we really have those kind of idols anymore. Maybe we do to some degree, but not that I know about. Okay, we don't have a big golden calf that we worship today, right? But does that mean we don't have idolatry? We absolutely have idolatry. Matter of fact, I think the idol of this country, I think everybody has one in their homes. I think everyone has one in their bathroom. I think everyone looks at it every morning before they go to work or school. I'm talking about a mirror. I think we can become our own idols. What we want, what we desire can become the idols that God was talking about. See, these people in the Bible, they were searching for something to worship, if not God. So they would find a golden idol, or they would find this big intricate figure to worship, right? We don't do that anymore because our idol is in ourselves. And we have to stop being our own idols. Romans chapter 1, verse 23 said, they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images. Every time I read this, I think about images on the phone. Images that we're not supposed to be looking at, or TV that we're not supposed to be watching. So they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man. How many of us have done that? How many of us have put something in the place of God? Whether it's a person or an image or ourselves, we have put something or someone else in God's place. That's idolatry. It doesn't have to be a figurine, a golden calf, a golden image. All right, how many of y'all are nerds in here and watch Lord of the Rings? Oh my goodness, never mind. Let's just skip past that example. Never. Nobody in here watches Lord of the Rings. Okay, Vicky, I knew I could count on you. Back there. There you go. For those of you who don't, I'm going to have to explain the whole movie now. We're going to be here for another 15, 20 minutes. If you watch the Lord of the Rings, it's this kind of alternate reality, not really alternate reality, but it's a different world that they live in. And you understand that here in this world, there's good and there's evil, of course, just like in our world. But in the title, Lord of the Rings, all right, it kind of gives you a hint as to what the movie's going to be about. There's this one ring. It's a magical ring, and it is super powerful, okay? You can have almost unstoppable power. You can have unnatural long life. You can have the gift of invisibility if you get this one ring, okay? Not everybody knows about it, but the ring has a master. And the ring is constantly trying to get back to its original creator. And the ring causes you, although it gives you all these powers, the ring causes you to become this evil person. And so, as the movie progresses, there's this this character called Gollum who gets the ring, okay? And he's just this normal old fisherman, and he gets this ring, and he is so captivated by it that he ends up becoming a murderer, becoming a thief, and becoming this horrible creature that can't focus on anything else beside this ring. Well, he eventually loses the ring. Some unfortunate events happen. He loses the ring, and the ring is taken from him. And it gets into the hands of this innocent man by the name of Frodo. And Frodo is going to carry this ring and destroy it, because although this ring gives you so much power, he understands how much more evil it does than good. And so Frodo is taking it to the place where it was crafted, to throw it into the fires of this huge volcanic-looking mountain, all right, to destroy this ring forever, destroy that evil forever. And Gollum follows him and tries to take that ring and tries to kill him and get that ring. And so at the end of the movie and at the end of the series, which all hinges around this ring being destroyed, Frodo's about to throw the ring into the fire and into this volcano to destroy it. And before he throws it in, Gollum takes it from him. Well, they get in like a shoving match, and eventually Frodo shoves Gollum off of the cliff into the volcano. And so Gollum gets the ring, but he's falling to his death. And if you watch the movie, they take a good 15, 20 seconds and show you how happy Gollum is to have that ring. Even though he's falling to his death, to burn, to die, he is so happy to have that ring. And he gets to have that pleasure for about 5 seconds. And then he falls into the volcano and he dies with a smile on his face. I think that's how we are. We get so satisfied with the things of this earth. We're falling to our death, but we just won't let go of that idol. Oh, I love that thing so much. I love money so much. I love power so much. I love entertainment. I love alcohol so much. It's giving me so much pleasure for 5 seconds. But you don't know you're falling into a volcano to burn. What's become your idol? What have you given up for your soul? We have to be careful. If we want to keep ourselves from escaping, or if we want to keep ourselves from being in the wilderness and having no direction, no purpose, as the children of Israel, then we must not have idols. To escape the wilderness, we must not indulge in sexual immorality. Now, when I was a kid and I heard that word, I freeze up, I tense up, like, oh, okay, blah, 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 I don't want to hear it. Okay, it's an uncomfortable phrase and uncomfortable to talk about. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, it says that if we want to keep ourselves from becoming like the children of Israel in the wilderness, all right, that we have to remove sexual immorality from among us. So if you read in Romans chapter 1 in verse 26, it talks about how the people here of Rome had become so perverted that the sons were having natural relations or unnatural relations and sleeping with their father's wife. Now, it's not an Oedipus complex. It's not their biological mother, but it's rather their step mother that they're sleeping with and having relations with. Still atrocious. They said it's not even known among pagans. Pagans don't even do this. And they were committing these horrible atrocities. Will you look around at our nation and our culture? We are one of the most sexually perverted and sexually perverse nations on the planet, right? Throughout all of humanity. And we're taking steps towards more perverse things. Right now, we're into homosexuality and transgenderism. How long before we get into bestiality and pedophilia and stuff like that? It's only a step away, folks. And so when we read and think about these things, about sexual immorality, we're taken back like, what terrible people, what perverted people would commit these things. But he doesn't just talk about the perverse things, the things that we think are gross, like homosexuality or transgenderism or bestiality. Those are all sexual immoralities. He's not talking about just those things. He's talking about sexual immorality as a whole. He's talking about cheating on your wife. He's talking about having premarital sex. Did you know that our word for pornography, the English word pornography, comes as a derivation from the word immorality, the Greek word for immorality? So included in this is pornography, premarital sex, extramarital sex. And how many of us have struggled with that? So we like to point fingers at all the problems of sexual immorality in this country. How many of us have contributed to it? And I think it would be scary if everyone in here who has struggled with that in their past had to stand up, because it would be a lot of us. We have to combat it harder. And I know that we live in a culture where it's on the TV, it's on our phone, where it's out in the community. It's everywhere, and everywhere everybody is doing it. But we have to be guarded as a church and not be participants of this sexually perverse world. We have to be pure. and still be this beacon of light, this beacon of purity for this world. And so I challenge you, as I challenge myself, be better on this topic and on this subject, so that we can be a beacon and so that we won't be lost in the wilderness, and especially the wilderness of sexual immorality. How many lives have been destroyed by sexual immorality? There's no positives to sexual immorality. Nobody comes out of it clean, okay? You're going to deal with that issue for the rest of your life. Will it get better over time if you've repented and you've changed your life? It will get better, but you're going to deal with that sin for the rest of your life. It's an irremovable mark. And a lot of us have it. And so we have to teach sexual purity, and we have to remain sexually pure so that we can be the leaders of this country, and we can lead us and our people out of the wilderness. Number 4, to escape to escape the wilderness, we must not put Christ to the test. Now, that's kind of hard to think about, to put Christ to the test, because he is a concrete being, but sometimes we view him as an abstract being, as a being that we can't talk to, or as a being that doesn't come down and we can shake his hand or anything like that. But he absolutely is a concrete being as well. What does it mean to put Christ to the test? Okay, how many of y'all are teachers in here? We've got a ton of teachers. You know that testing is important, right? You test to make sure that your students are on track. You test to make sure you don't need to reteach or do anything differently. Or you test to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. That's what testing's for. So when you think about we must not put Christ to the test, Christ doesn't need a test. He doesn't have to prove himself to us. We don't need to doubt him. That's putting Christ to the test. Christ needs to be the one who we just ultimately trust in. We ultimately have faith in. And that we never waver in doubting him and his methods. My grandparents, when they were just married, and I think my grandmother got married at 17. That'd be interesting. How many of y'all got married at 17? Who in here got married at 17? Who got married at 18? Yeah, I knew. I knew Deborah was an early marriage. What about 19? We got any 19 marriages? Were you 19? No, you're 20. That's right. Okay. I forgot. So they got married very, very early. Okay, and so by the time they were 20, 22 years old, they had 2 kids. And so they were very poor to begin with. And he worked at a grocery store, and then eventually became a chicken inspector. And they saved up their money because they were going to buy a house. And so they loved this house that was just on the outskirts of Decatur, in between Decatur and Athens, which would be a good place for where he worked, would be easy access to where his job was at. And they looked at this house, and they took their realtor with them, and they're looking at this house, and they fall in love. And they're like, this is the house. This is the one. It's beautiful. It has everything we want. And their realtor gets the price from the sellers, because I don't think they had Zillow back then. And so they get the price from the realtor or the seller, and the seller says it's X amount of dollars, which was maybe a couple of $1,000s out of their price range, which back then was a lot of money. And so this house that they were so dead set on getting, and they were so happy to raise their family in, they didn't get. And so they ended up having to buy a house in Decatur. They didn't like it as much, but it still was a home, warm home for them to be in. Well, a year later, my granddad is reading the paper or watching the news or whatever, and he sees where a tornado has gone through and completely wiped that house off of its foundation. And it happened during the night, because he worked night shift, when he wouldn't have been home, and his wife, my dad, and my dad's little brother would have been home, and they would have been killed. Had they gotten that house, they would have been killed. Their house would have been wiped away. Now, is this divine intervention? We can have a debate on that. I don't know. But I do know this. Sometimes God closes doors because he knows if you open those doors, it's going to be devastating for you. And sometimes God opens doors that you didn't really want to open because he knows that's what's going to be best for you. And so he asks us in 1 Corinthians, he says, don't put me to the test. Don't doubt me. Have faith. Trust in me. And I will provide for you. So my advice to you today is when you leave here, start having more faith in Christ. Start having more trust and less doubt in God. And not just in himself, but the lifestyle that he gives you. Because a lot of us walk this pathway of life with one foot in and one foot out. We want to be in church. We want to be a part of the church. But we also want to have our worldly pleasures and our worldly life. That's putting Christ to the test. In Matthew chapter 19, we read about the story of the rich young ruler. And man, he had everything down to a T. Until God said, trust me. Hey, just trust me right here when I tell you this. You're not going to like it, but trust me. Sell all your possessions and come and follow me. And the rich young ruler, I trust you. I kept all your commandments. You're asking too much. You're closing the door that I don't want to close. He didn't trust in God. So for us in our lives, we must trust God. And number 5, to escape the wilderness, we must not grumble. Don't be a complainer. How many of y'all know complainers? Nobody in here? Good. Great news. All right. How many of y'all are a complainer? If I see more hands that y'all are a complainer than y'all know, then we're in trouble. We've all been a complainer at some point in our life. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 10, it tells us here that if we want to keep ourselves from being the wanderers in the wilderness, all right, that we must not grumble. Be happy. Be positive. You know, I was watching this video on the internet the other day, and it was a guy talking about complainers. And he said, the moment you want to complain, stop what you're doing and think that there is somebody in this world that is the same age as you that just lost a child, that just lost a loved one. Before you complain, stop and think that there is somebody that is the same age as you that just received news that they had cancer and they had 3 months to live. And before we complained about our life, about our struggles, about our problems, or about somebody else, if we stopped and thought about those things, I think that we would be a lot more positive. I don't think we would complain. God doesn't like complainers. Paul tells us, don't be a complainer. That was one of the major problems of the Israelites. What about complainers in terms of what's going on in the church? I've seen this before, and maybe I've fallen in the trap of being this before. Complaining about the leadership. Complaining about a program that we don't like the way it's being run. Complaining about a person in the congregation who does this and that, or complaining about a song leader or a preacher, or complaining about someone who does the Lord's Supper, or how we do the Lord's Supper, or complaining about the carpet or the lights, or complaining that we spent this money on that or that money on this. Complaining. And sometimes we fall into the trap of being complainers about the church. Same thing. Before you complain about the church, what's going on? Stop and think. Did you know that there's many countries in this world where there's not a church, where there are believers and they don't have a church, they don't have a group of people to worship with that can support them, that can love them, that they can worship and have the same values as them. If we thought about that before we complained about the color of the carpet or the fact that we went with these lights instead of the other ones, I think we'd be a little more grateful. Now, does that mean that we shouldn't raise questions when some things happen that we don't think are biblical? Absolutely not. If the leadership or someone strays biblically, right, it's our duty, it's our responsibility to make sure that we put them back in line in a gentle way, right? But in terms of the things that don't matter, the unbiblical stuff, we've got to stop complaining. Don't be a complainer. Don't be a whiner. My dad's not really a whiner or complainer. He's usually just kind of a go-with-the-flow kind of guy. But there was this one time, it was a Friday night, and it was me and my two sisters that were still living at home and my mom. And it was Fridays, and we had talked the day before that we were going to go to the movies. It was going to be movie night for the family. Back when people used to go to the movies. That was a big deal for us. You know, the movies was a big event. And so we were getting ready to choose a movie, and Mom went online in her little Windows 1990 whatever computer and said, "Oh, look, there's this cartoon movie. It's called Up." And Dad did not want to see that. He wanted to see this. There was this action movie, whichever action movie it was, where somebody was going to, drive a fast car and shoot, and there was going to be fighting and action. That's what he wanted to see, as every guy would want to see. And so he was like, "Why don't we go see the action movie?" And when a wife and a husband make a decision, the wife always wins, right? The wife will always a lose-lose situation. If the guy wins, the wife gets mad, and the wife ends up winning. All right, it's better just skip that step and let the wife win to begin with, okay? So we end up going to see this cartoon movie called Up. And my dad, he just acted like he was just not going to watch it, acted like he was asleep the whole time, just acting awful, really, acting like a 2-year-old. And so he's sitting there acting like he's asleep. He's got his glasses on, he's leaned back, and I'm constantly nudging, "Dad, wake up, the movie's on." And if you've seen the movie Up, I mean, that movie will make you cry. That movie will make you cry. It's about a husband that loved his little wife so much that he built her this house, and he gave her everything, and the wife ends up dying of cancer, and he ends up becoming this grumpy old man, and this young kid who's a Boy Scout, who's kind of bullied and made fun of and doesn't have a good home life, comes to him and tries to befriend him, and he kind of shoves him off. And it's the plot is his transition from this grouch to this guy who ends up becoming a softie who loves this kid and spends time with. It is a touching movie. You need to go watch it. But he was not having it at the beginning. And he's just mad and steaming that and then I look over towards the end of the movie, and he has got tears down his face. I mean, he is crying, his shirt's wet. And at the end of the movie, we're walking to the parking lot, and he hugs us all, and he's crying. He's like, "I'm sorry that I was such a jerk. I'll never complain again." And so he learned that day, don't be a complainer, right? Sometimes it's better to just be positive. So the 5 pieces of advice that Moses gave, that Paul gave the people in Corinth to keep themselves from being overthrown in the wilderness is: don't desire evil. Don't be idolaters. Don't be sexually immoral. Don't put Christ to the test, and don't grumble. Don't be a complainer. And if we do these things, he said, this is an example for us. If we do these things, then we won't ever have to worry about wandering in the wilderness called life. So many people have no direction, have no purpose, have no hope. They're wandering the wilderness. The great thing is we have purpose, we have hope, we have direction. We have a family, and we have a home. And so today, if maybe you're in a situation where you feel like you're in the wilderness and you feel like you don't have hope or direction, or you don't have a home, or you don't have purpose, or maybe you're just in the wilderness because you've strayed from the path, and like that runner, you've been caught in this sandstorm and you've lost your direction and course. Maybe you need to get back on track. Maybe you need to be found. I don't know what situation that you're in right now. I don't know if you're a Christian or you're not a Christian. I don't know if you're a lost Christian or someone outside of Christ due to your actions. I don't know your situation. But whatever it is, if you are not a Christian or you need to get right with the Lord, we're here to pray for you and with you. And you have a family that will love you, hug your neck, and help you get on the right path. Whatever you need this morning, please come as we stand and as we sing.
Hello, my name's Philip Goad, and I'm privileged to serve as the minister here at North Highlands Church of Christ. You may have heard something in today's message that has you asking questions, searching for answers, wanting to know more about God and His plan for you. If that's where you are, we would love nothing more than to set up a time to study the Bible with you. If you'll reach out to us, we'll set up a time that works for you. We'll open the Bible, we'll search for those answers, we'll find the answers to the questions that you have. We'd also invite you to come out and connect with us in person. Come out and worship with us. Sunday mornings we worship at 9:30 a.m. and that's followed by Bible classes for all ages. We come back Sunday evenings at 6 o'clock for another time of Bible study. And then midweek, Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m., the church gathers. It's another time of Bible study. And again, classes are offered for all ages. If you're needing to be at home, all of our services are streamed live on our Facebook page, and you can connect with us that way. Saturdays, the third Saturday of each month, we have a food bank. It's open from 9 to 11 a.m. It provides food to those who need it, and so if you know of someone within Franklin County who's in need of food, please let them know about the food bank that's open the third Saturday of each month from 9 to 11 a.m. It's one of the ways that our church serves our community. Thank you for connecting with us today. Thank you for being a part of this, and I hope to connect with you in person very soon.